meeting of the Measure T Investment Steering Committee. Thank you for being a part of the committee. I'm going to turn this over to Supervisor Poitras, one of the co-chairs. He and both Brett Frazier, who are both supervisors as well as co-chairs. Turn it over to them and start the meeting. Rob?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Georgina, and welcome everybody. And it's a great pleasure and honor to have everybody join us. I think we've got a great team, a great lineup of folks, and a lot of representation from the various parts of our county and industry. So first of all, I believe it would be appropriate to, we'll have introductions, which would be actually a roll call by Dina. We'll just, people will say yes, and we'll know who is here. And then we'll go on to the approval of the minutes, and then move on to the rest of the agenda. So let's go ahead and start with a roll call, Dina. Thank you.
And Dina, maybe you can follow up with the meeting protocol as well. Thank you.
Sure. Madera Chamber of Commerce, Debbie Bray. MVP Realty, John Reed. Red Barn Cafe owner, Lisa Soroyan. Here. Yosemite Sierra Visitors Bureau, Rhonda Salisbury.
Here.
City of Chowchilla, Mayor Palmer.
Here.
City of Chowchilla, Rod Pruitt.
Here.
City of Chowchilla, Jason Rogers.
Here.
City of Madera, Jose Rodriguez.
Here.
City of Madera, Mayor Garcia. City of Madera, Arnaldo Rodriguez.
Here.
City of Madera, Keith Helmuth.
Here.
City of Madera, Ellen Bitter.
Here.
Valley Children's Hospital, Tim Curley.
Here.
Madera County Public Health Department, Sarah Bose. District 1 Supervisor, Supervisor Frazier.
Here.
District 3 Supervisor, Supervisor Poitras.
Yes.
Madera County Board of Supervisors, Jay Barney.
Here.
Madera County Planning Department, Matt Traber.
Present.
Madera County Public Works Department, Jared Carter.
Good afternoon.
Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, Madeline Harris.
Here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Camarena Health Center, Paulo Soros. Camarena Health Center, Nicole Mesquita. Madera County Farm Bureau, Christina Beckstead.
Here.
Creekside Farming, Devinder Malik.
Here.
Actually, that's Devinder Mahil.
Mahil, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm here.
You're all good to correct me whenever I feel like. Madera County Superintendent of Schools, Opie Ryer. Madera County College, Dr. Angel Reyna. Cal Fire Madera Chapter, Matt Watson.
Here.
California Department of Transportation, Michael Navarro.
Here.
Our Building Industry Association, Michael Prandini. Madera County Economic Development Commission, Bobby Kahn.
Yes.
Tehipity Chapter of the Sierra Club, Bill. NCTC, NCTA, Patricia Taylor.
Here.
Central California Labor Council, Mike Lopez.
Here.
Central California Labor Council, Chuck Riojas. Social Service Transportation Advisory Council, Frank Simonis. Our Active Transportation Advocate, Jeffrey Wheeler.
Here.
San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, Paul Herman. San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, Dan Levitt. Our student representative from Madera Community College, Jonathan Strohmeyer. Our community advocate, Derek Robinson. And our community advocate, Donald Hawley. Okay, that concludes roll call.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dina. So the next order of business, I'd like to move on to the approval of the minutes. I'm not sure how many people have had a chance to take a look at them. I've had a chance to take a look at them, and if there's any questions, please ask those. Otherwise, I'll accept the motion for action.
Bobby Kahn, move to approve.
Tim Curley, second.
Thank you. And what we'll do is if there's anybody, if there's a dissenting vote, please say so at this point. Otherwise, we will move on as if it was approved. Okay, very good. And I think I may have cut Dina short. I think, Dina, you were going to go over the protocols, and then I'm going to ask Supervisor if he has any comments.
And Dina, maybe we could just do that very briefly. I think just hit the highlights.
Very good. Probably the biggest highlights would be when we call upon you for talking, either during a agenda item or during the open section at the end, that state your name, agency, organization, or special interest group. We'll be limiting to 2 minutes for speaking. Staff will announce your time when your time is up. And if you're joining us from the public, I'll unmute and mute you. You can direct questions to the speaker or the steering committee by raising your hand. You can also ask questions in the Q&A box. If you've joined us via phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute and mute yourself. I think that'll be that. We'll put some information if you have technical issues into the chat box. You can reach out to either myself or Hector Guerra.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dina. Supervisor Frazier, do you have any words of inspiration or anything for the good of the order?
Just happy to see this many people on here. Appreciate all of you being on here. For you, co-chair, I will be scouring, looking for hands raised so that you can stay focused on making the meeting go. So I'll be looking at that for you too. Very good. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. Great teamwork. So, Georgina, let's go ahead and move on. Item number 2, the review of MCTC funding allocation.
Yes, and Troy McNeil with MCTC is going to present this issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Georgina and Mr. Chair. Troy McNeil, Deputy Director, Fiscal Supervisor for MCTC. Briefly, I want to review some of the funding sources and breakdown that goes into transportation projects. If you look on the screen here and see this picture, this is a simplified version of how transportation is funded in our state. It's very, very, very complex. And as you can tell, it's even in the simplified version, sometimes it's hard to follow and track. There's vehicle registration fees, there's gasoline taxes, there's the federal fuel tax, there's sales taxes, diesel taxes, there's bonds that are issued, there's fees, there's tolls. There's a myriad of different sources of funding that go into delivering and building roads and delivering transportation projects. And it's very complex. They come from different funding sources. They're controlled by various agencies. Sometimes the amounts can vary. And so from a planning perspective, sometimes it's tricky. And some of these funding sources are restrictive in nature, can only go to certain type of projects. And so there's not just one big pot of money that is divvied up or decided from. It's very restrictive. Usually there's small pots of money that only go to certain types of projects. So next slide.
Sorry.
So a good resource if for any of you that want to understand a little bit more about transportation funding, Caltrans publishes a book, Transportation Funding in California. There's the link on the screen there. And you can go and understand a little bit more about some of these funding sources. This book that they publish provides a good overview of the transportation system and the different roles and responsibilities from the different agencies and how transportation projects are funded in our state. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Next slide. So in the next couple of slides, just wanted to give kind of a highlight of some of the major funding sources that we deal with or that we administer here in Madera in our region. And some of them are controlled through our agency, some are controlled through the federal government, some are controlled by the state, some are controlled by the local agencies. If you haven't already noticed or haven't learned in transportation, there's a ton of acronyms, probably like a lot of industries. And so we use a lot of acronyms in the transportation world. And we will have a quiz at the end. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, let's talk about the local transportation fund. It is part of our state sales tax. A quarter cent goes back to the county from where it originates from for transportation projects, primarily funds transit, streets and roads, bicycle and pedestrian type projects. Also, one of the funds controlled or administered by MCTC is the Regional Service Transportation Program, or RSTP. These are federal funds that we exchange for state funds and then get forwarded to MCTC to work with our local agencies to deliver projects. They can be used on a variety of different types of projects, but our agencies historically have used them for street maintenance type projects. Just some of the highlights on the Federal Highway Administration funds, or federal funds we call them. You've probably heard about CMAQ, congestion mitigation and air quality type projects. We have the Highway Improvement Program, and then there's a myriad of different competitive programs that we try to apply for. The thing about federal funds is they all require a match. And that is one of the good things about Measure T or having a local measure is we have a match source that can help leverage federal funds to go after competitive projects. Next slide.
Sorry.
Some of the street and road funds administered by the state is most of you are probably familiar with the SB1. Within SB1, there's a variety of different funding programs, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, Solutions for Congested Corridors. There's the Local Partnership Program. These are competitive in nature. We do get a little bit in Local Partnership Program because we have a sales tax measure that still requires a match against our measure to deliver projects. Also controlled by the state is the State Highway Operations and Protection Program, or SHOP program. This is primarily to do rehabilitation, maintenance type projects. And SHOP was one of our funding sources for the recent SB1 or the recent State Route 99 widening project from 12 to 17. So we're thankful for the state to prioritize those funds towards that project. And we will continue to work with the state to prioritize SHOP funds in our area. Also administered by the state are the regional improvement funds and the interregional improvement funds. Regional improvement funds are controlled by our region, by MCTC, working with our local partners. Primarily, those funds get put on state highway systems, and some of those funds went towards the 99 widening project. The interregional improvement funds are controlled by Caltrans, and they control those through the district and at headquarters. And we work with them to try to secure some interregional improvement funds for state highway systems. Some of the funds administered by local agencies, you've probably heard the term gas taxes. The local agencies receive gas taxes directly to them, and they use those primarily for funding their maintenance crews and fixing potholes and different things, their equipment that they need. That's a big part of what they do at the local level. Next project. The next slide. Transit.
Okay, let me make sure I went to the
Sorry.
right place. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Fine. So transit, there's a variety of different funding sources for transit. Some of the funds controlled or administered by MCTC. I did mention the LTF earlier, the local transportation fund, those fund operations and capital. It's a main funding source for our transit. They also have the state transit assistance program that comes that's funded from diesel taxes that come in and are administered by MCTC. We have the low carbon transit operations program that is funded by the cap and trade. We internally call that LC top, and that is primarily for capital projects to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions through transit projects. And then SB1 has a transit program called State of Good Repair that is for capital. And then we have in our Measure T, our current measure for transit enhancement to help fund transit. Funds that are controlled or administered by the federal government is 5307, 5339, 5311. These are all sections of the code, and they are for operation capital, and 5339, as it says there, is for capital purposes. So the local agencies determined how to spend these funds. Usually it's funding their main operations. There is a match. Like I said, all federal funds require match, and they usually match these with LTF and STA funds and or Measure T funds to match those funds. There is quite about amount that we get in these federal funds, and we'll cover some of that here in a later slide. Next slide. Active transportation. So I just want to highlight that a lot of the funds that I've been listing are funds that are formula-based or funds that we typically get. I have not included any of the competitive discretionary grant programs. And so I do list on here on the state is they do have the competitive statewide program for ATP. Those are very, very competitive. And then we do have the 2% set aside from LTF that goes into active transportation. And then the Measure T environmental enhancement, 2% can be used for active transportation projects. As you can see, not a lot of funding sources or dedicated funding sources currently for active transportation type projects. A lot of the funding sources have been used for other sources. Next slide.
Okay.
I'll turn it over, or if there's any questions.
I think we do have a question, but I also wanted to point out that this was a great presentation. I really actually enjoyed the flow chart of that. I've now seen the way that we get our funding in many different forms. I really like that one. But one of the things I think that's important to note for some of us that aren't in transportation is that these are the funds that do it. And what was excluded is that, you know, it's not a function of the county or the city's general funds to do these projects. It comes from all these sources and generally not a general fund expense. So I just wanted to point that out that, you know, it is subvented coming from the state and federal monies to do all of our transportation items in the county and city.
And this is Georgina, Vivian. I would just also add that there are a number of other local funding sources that are used for transportation projects across the county, including traffic impact fees that the local agencies collect and individually for improvements within their jurisdiction. There are also developer-funded projects that occur across the county, depending upon the type of development and the types of impacts that they may have. So they need to mitigate their impacts, and that's usually identified through an environmental process. I just thought I'd throw that in for you.
So it looked like we did have a question from Jared Carter and then a couple in the chat. So Jared, did you want to ask your question now?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Supervisor, and everyone. Wasn't really a question. I guess I was just going to add to the discussion as Georgina mentioned and Troy and Supervisor Frazier. I mean, there's a lot of different funding sources from a lot of different agencies. And with those sources, on top of, you know, some of the limitations on what they can be used for, like Troy mentioned, they all come with their own set of rules and guidelines that we have to follow too. Everything related to the environmental, to reporting, to specific things. So there is a lot that happens, you know, speaking from an implementing agency side where we use this fund to get projects done. It can get quite complicated and very cumbersome when you start diving into some of these funding programs, on all the things that you have to do to comply with the guidelines and requirements of them. So just wanted to kind of make a comment about that. Speaking openly, our local measures and things like that are probably the easiest to use and the most flexible. So it's nice to have that availability of those funds. Things like the traffic impact fees, like Georgina mentioned, are definitely helpful. But obviously, we don't have near the money that we would like to have or need. So these other sources do certainly come into play, but it does bring a whole new set of things that we have to think about and make sure that we're doing when we use those. So
Thank you, Jared. And Jeffrey Wheeler, does that look like that was answered in the chat? The HUTA is the highway user tax accounts. Are you satisfied with that? Or did you have further questions on that?
Let's see, I'm just trying to pull up my chat here. Oh, that's the gas tax. Okay, that makes sense now.
Very good. Do you have some questions regarding that?
Oh, the highway gas tax, and that's a state tax, right?
Right.
Right, and it can be, it goes to the state, and we'll get it in terms of grants or funding for different things, right? And what about for funding for rail, or high-speed rail, or for Amtrak?
Troy, do you want to answer that, or?
So I don't handle any of those funds for those systems, so I'm not up to speed. I know that the Amtrak is a national system, so they use, you know, fees from the users that use the system, and then I think they receive some other funding from federal funding sources and whatnot, but I'm not familiar with those sources.
And high-speed rail is federal funding as well, and I think some of high-speed rail's funding came from SB1.
The high-speed rail was a statewide proposition that was passed by the voters. So there's state dollars in there and then matching federal funds. As far as like for Amtrak and rail, you know, we have membership from MCTC on the SJJPA that runs that line. And it does come from a lot of the funding from Caltrans as well as federal funding.
Yeah, and there's also other grant programs. There's a transit intercity rail capital program. So there's other grant opportunities to access rail funding as well.
And in terms of ATP, have we gotten any grants through the competitive state ATP?
Yes, we have. I believe each of our agencies, or I know the City of Madera and City of Chowchilla received one. I can't remember about the county. But it is very difficult to secure those from a competitive standpoint, but we have received a couple.
There's a movement towards expanding the active transportation program. So we may see in the future additional funding being allocated for those purposes. And we are actually, or the local jurisdictions are working together to prepare themselves to apply for those funds.
There was a question from Tim Curley.
Yeah,
Yes.
regarding the local transportation fund, the LTF or local transportation fund comes from 1/4 cent of the state general sales tax. that is returned back to the county as source that goes into the LTF fund.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Madeline Harris has her hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Madeline from Leadership Council. I just wanted to say I appreciated you noting, Troy, how competitive ATP is, that it would rely on jurisdictions to apply for those funds for specific projects, and how currently the component of Measure T that we'd be relying on for those funds is the 2% for environmental enhancement. So I think it really speaks to the fact that we need to increase the percent of Measure T dollars, which are like relatively open to be used according to the expenditure plan's rules, for things that would fund active transportation projects. Because I know from the work I do with community that there's a lot of community priorities for those types of projects. So maybe we can talk more about that later under steering committee member priorities, but I wanted to raise that now and I appreciated you pointing it out.
Thank
All
you for that
right.
comment.
If there's no other questions, let's go ahead and move on to item 3, review expected Measure T renewal funding proceeds, 20 and 30 years or until ended by voters. Georgina.
Great. Yes, thank you. So we are potentially looking at funding the new measure for either a 20 or a 30-year period or until ended by voters, which means that it would just go on in perpetuity until voters decided that it should end. For a 20-year measure, looking at a 3% annual growth rate in Measure T funds from sales tax, which is based upon historical proceeds, what MCTC has received from the state sales tax as it's collected for Madera County in the past, moving that forward into the future. For the year 2027-2028, which is when the new measure would take effect, we would bring in about $15 million that one year. For year 2046-47, that would inflate to about almost $27 million. So the total over the 20-year period would be about $411 million, or roughly $20 million a year on average. When you look at a 30-year measure, for 2027-2028, of course, it would be the same as for the 20-year measure, 15 million. By year 2056-57, which is 10 years further into the future, it would be about $36 million a year. So the total over a 30-year period would be about $728 million. Of course, we haven't projected in perpetuity because we don't know what that horizon year is for the measure. Hopefully it would, if that is the option that's chosen, that the measure funds would come in, and of course there would be priorities for how those funds are spent in the renewal plan, in the investment plan. Any questions? One of the things that we will be looking at is whether we want to go with a 20-year measure, a 30-year measure, or until ended by voters. When the polling was done, we presented that to you last month. When the polling was done, the until ended by voters received the highest voter approval in that poll because they felt that they would have control over how the money is spent in the investment plan, and of course they would have the opportunity to stop the sales tax when they felt it was necessary. The 20-year measure, I believe, did a little bit better than the 30-year measure. So
I think it should be until ended by voters.
Yes, it does give that ability to the public to decide when it should be renewed or when it should end. Right now, we are preparing these plans. We prepared a plan in 2006 for the current measure, which ends in 2026-27. And so we're going through this planning process. And the planning process is very similar to the regional transportation planning process. And that occurs every 4 years. So the two plans should be consistent to the extent possible. So that planning process really addresses the types of projects and programs that will be carried out over a 20-year time frame. So if until ended by voters, then this plan, the plan that you're going to be preparing, if that's what we decide to do, it would just continue and it would be amended appropriately and updated to reflect the changes that occur and as reflected in the regional transportation plan.
Georgina, when is the, I see the regional plan and the calendar. When would that be that we would have to make that final decision about 10-20 or into perpetuity or until voters decided to change it? When is that decision?
Yeah, I think when we look at the different projects from the regional transportation planning process, Dylan and other MCTC staff are currently working on the regional transportation plan. Okay. There is an unconstrained list of projects. It's a huge list of projects, well over 800 plus projects of all different modes. When the funding is looked at, what funding is expected to come in over the next 20 or 30 years, that funding then would be allocated to a list of projects. Those projects are being evaluated in terms of how they stack up against other similar projects by mode. And so you'll be able to see what can get funded and what can't get funded. And when you see that difference, you're going to see projects that won't be able to be funded over a 20-year time frame. So maybe a 30-year time frame makes more sense so that those projects can be brought into the fold and ensured that funding over time will go to them. With an until ended by voters option, it just gives that opportunity to MCTC to really look at the priorities for each of the different modes and continually update their regional transportation plan, knowing that they've got a continual source of funding that can go toward those projects.
Okay, very good.
And yeah, so we're expecting the list of projects and the prioritization process and MCTC to have some preliminary findings on which projects may be funded and which projects may not, would still remain on the unconstrained funding list. And we hope to know that either probably likely in December.
Okay. Well, thank you. Are there any questions in regards to this presentation? If not, let's go ahead and move on to item number 4. Probably... Yes. Oh, yes, we have a hand up. Frank.
Thank you. Frank Simonis, Social Services Transportation Advisory Council. How would the voters know to say we'd like to end it? Because they don't get to put things on a ballot. So how would anybody know how to do that if it came to that point?
I'm going to ask our subconsultant, Charles Heath with TBWBH, to give you a succinct answer because I would probably kind of skirt around it a little bit. But Charles, if you'd like to answer that question for us, please.
Yeah, no problem. And this is actually a common approach to tax measures around the state. There are many examples that have this duration component built in that is basically until ended by voters. And the process that the citizens could use to end the tax would be the citizens initiative process. So the same way that you can, have a referendum or a citizens initiative on any other policy issue, you can also repeal a tax. So by collecting signatures and taking the issue to a public vote, a simple majority vote of the county residents could repeal the tax. And that would be the process for ending it.
And that would be 50% plus 1, right?
Correct. So while it requires a 2/3 vote for us to pass a tax, the public can rescind a tax with a simple majority vote.
All right.
Okay, all right. That sounds like it would more or less be a permanent tax then without going through that big effort to undo it.
Yes, it would be in play until the voters end it through that process. Correct.
Mr.
Thank you.
Varney.
Yeah, Mayor Palmer had a question in the chats, and I was hoping somebody could answer that because I had the same similar question. It'll just keep us from repeating.
Okay. Agreed. Many projects take multiple years of allocations. If Measure T was to end before project completion, a project could maybe at risk of not being completed. Troy, do you want to?
Yeah, so would we be bonding the projects at the time we start, therefore the financing would be protected? Or is there the possibility, as the mayor's question kind of implies, that we could get caught with a project that's 18 years completed and the voters choose or elect to end the Measure T financing?
That's a good
So-
question. Go ahead, Troy.
So for our current measure and for any measure with any revenues, we use a cash flow model, and within the cash flow model, we identify and forecast what would be reasonably available over the time using conservative numbers. And within that, we then only program projects that we are confident that there will be sufficient funds to fund those. And so even though there's still the asterisk of, yes, it is a possibility, but we try to do our best to run conservative estimates in our cash flow model to ensure that any project that we commit to has sufficient funding to do what we have planned to do. And I would assume in a new measure, we would do the same thing, have a cash flow model and run that out and commit to projects that we have a reasonable assurance to fund.
Correct. That's right.
And Madeline.
Hi, thank you. Madeline from Leadership Council again. So my question is kind of similar, I think, to Frank's. If in 20 years, if a until ended by voters model were adopted, if in 20 years residents no longer approve of the expenditure plan, but agree that there should be a sales tax for transportation, would they need to have 50% plus one of voters' signatures or votes in order to end the tax measure and then readopt it? Or would there be a way to alter the expenditure plan in a way that voters approve of should public opinion and conditions in the county change?
Yes, there are procedures to amend the plan. I'm going to turn that over to both Troy and Tricia to kind of take us through, but there are procedures that could be looked at to actually amend the plan and make changes.
Yeah, so the Public Utilities Code, which lays out the rules for sales tax measures, allows you to, once upon adoption, allows you to annually review those plans and amend if necessary. There is a public process that has to occur, a public hearing process and noticing to the different city councils and the board of supervisors that would have to occur on any changes or amendments to the plan. So there is a process. We wouldn't have to necessarily end the tax, go back out to the voters. Once the tax is approved, we can amend it through a public process.
All right, very good. Thank you. And then we can continue to revisit this since we don't have to make this decision, but we could even have some conversation between staff and those interested offline and even get more detail. Diana Palmer.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify a little bit of what I was trying to get at. And it's more of that we go into a planning phase, which we pay for, and then we go into an implementation phase, and then we go into a programming phase. And there's all of these phases And from start to finish may take 10 years, which in between that time, if Measure T is not renewed because we haven't decided to just go ahead and just do it indefinitely until the voters repeal it, there could be projects that were already, have your technical assistance grant and all of that stuff done, but it hasn't gone to the next phase yet. And those projects may be at risk of losing their funding. So what was planned may not happen. That was kind of my point.
Very good. Thank you. And Madeline, you say you have a few more questions that you'd like to have answered. That's fine. Or, I'm sure staff would be happy to reach out to you for even more detailed type answers, if whatever you'd like.
I just wanted to clarify with the public process to amend the tax measure that could happen annually, would that need to be initiated by the Board of Supervisors and city councils?
It would be initiated by the authority, transportation authority,
Okay.
and then go from there. So within the expenditure plan that we're drafting, we would put language in there to explain what process we would undertake to, if any amendments need to be made to update the plan.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for now. Thanks.
Okay,
Great.
very good. And Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Troy, I was hoping that you may answer this question in regards to how much money we've been able to leverage with the Measure T dollars. If I don't know if you have that right off the top of your head, but maybe a ballpark figure.
So to date, through the end of the 2021 fiscal year, we can identify at least $226 million that we've leveraged with Measure T dollars, which is about $1.82 return on investment.
Yes, and that's just to show the magnitude of importance, I guess, for this measure here. So I too would like to see something like this move forward in perpetuity, because without it, I mean, you can just see that the dollars that are being leveraged for that wouldn't be available if we're not paying to play, so to speak, right? So I think it's important that as we go to the voters, that we also illustrate the amount of monies that we leverage per dollar that we're getting from every Measure T dollar. So I just want to highlight that out, because I think 20 years, I mean, going back to what Ms. Palmer had said, if there's any projects that are still underway, I mean, what happens? I think we just have to put it in our heads that this happened back in 2006 and it's coming to its end. And there's still, I believe I heard you correct, over hundreds of projects that are still remaining. I don't know that we'd get done through these here in the next 7-8 years. So I like the idea of having this in perpetuity. I mean, at least that's my 2 cents. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I don't see any more hands or anything in the chat box. So why don't we go ahead and move on to item 4. This would be the to review future year funding availability, other federal, state, local funding for transportation projects and programs. Mr. McNeil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've talked about those programs. We talked about what could be potentially expected over 20 or 30 years. And so can be reasonably be expected from the other fund sources that we talked about over the next 20 years. And so we assumed the next 20 years of a measure, and we had some reasonable assumptions based upon historical use. And so this is what our numbers show is essentially with roads, 521 million, with transit, about 144 million. Active transportation would have a dedicated funding source. That's the current dedicated funding source. And then there's the CMAQ, which is kind of a multimodal air quality miscellaneous category that funds a variety of different air quality type projects. One thing to know under the HUDA RMRA, which is the highway user tax, and the SB1 portion of the tax, the RMRA that go to agencies, is what impact is going to electric vehicles going to have on gas taxes. And so we have a reasonable number there, but it could be much less. unless a different type of system comes into play, a road charge or something to note of that. And so that is a big portion of street maintenance funds. And so if that number significantly comes down, that could have a drastic effect on fixing our roads. So I just want to highlight that number is kind of up in the air right now because we just don't know what it's going to look like in 20 or 30 years with the change to electric fleets across the board. So I just wanted to highlight that roads and transit do have various funding sources. Active transportation projects don't really have a lot of dedicated funding sources, formula funds or funds that we get that we can count on without having to go through a very competitive grant process and et cetera. So I can take any questions that anyone may have.
Very good. Any questions? It's definitely an important part of what we're talking about here. Without this, really nothing happens, active transportation, transit, or anything else. So,
Mr. Chair, sorry, Judy, if I can just add one more thing. If you can note, 714 million, if you saw the 20-year estimate for a potential Measure T renewal is about 411 million. And so you look at, that doesn't include the leveraging that we've been talking about, that Councilmember Rodriguez talked about and so if we can get 58% more dollars with Measure T and a leveraging, it can help our region significantly. And so I think it just shows how important having a sales tax measure is for our county.
I think the other thing that's evident from this spreadsheet is when you look at the totals for STIP, RSTP, LPP, and LTF, compared to what is going to street maintenance, there's really not a lot left of that $521 million that's dedicated to street and highways. Transit is at 144 million. So that would be very much comparable to what would be left outside of maintenance from HUDA and RMRA. I think that's notable. So I just wanted to make sure that was understood.
very good. Thank you, Georgina. We have a question from Madeline, and then Frank, you have a really good question that I'm looking forward to answering personally. So Madeline.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say this is a really helpful breakdown, and I wanted to just note the 521 million for roads versus 2.5 million for active transportation. So kind of going back to some of the questions I was asking about earlier, I wonder how we can increase those numbers for active transportation with like what we're able to match for through Measure T by increasing the percent of funds that could go to that. So I'd just like to keep that question in mind as we proceed.
I would add let me respond a little bit first, and then Troy can add to this. A lot of the transportation improvements that are currently in the that are being considered for the regional transportation plan, a number of those street and highway projects also include bike and pedestrian facilities. So they're included in the cost for those street and road projects. So I think that needs to be understood. There's quite a bit of cost for the bikeway additions and the sidewalks, curbs, gutters. All of that is included in those costs for the projects. Troy, did you want to add it?
That is a good point. And when we look at this spreadsheet, it is dedicated funding sources that are only for those type of projects. And you're right that there are some street and road projects that can be spent on when they fix a road. They will also fix sidewalks and put in bike lanes that is classified with road funds. And so that's something to note, that it's not really captured here. And so that's a good point.
All right, very good. And Frank, you have a question that says, how would electric vehicles be taxed regarding road use? Fantastic question. And it's something that needs to be addressed here in the state of California. So what's happened is in 2014, there was something called the Technical Advisory Committee for a Road Charge was created. I was appointed to represent the San Joaquin Valley on that particular commission or Technical Advisory Committee. And I've been on it now for roughly 8 years. We are looking at a way to even the playing field Because right now, electric cars and hybrid cars are not paying their fair share for roads. And we know that electric cars and hybrid cars, you know, if there's a graph, they're going to be, their use is going to be going up and up and up, and there's going to be fewer and fewer internal combustion cars on the road. So that means there's going to be less sales tax collected at the pump. So we knew this a long time ago, and so the legislature formed this committee. And so we've been working a lot with different pilot programs to figure out how do we cause all cars, regardless whether they're electric or gas, how do we charge? And we're looking at different electronic means, different ways to track miles, and then you're charged on a per mile basis. Now, there's some people that say outrageous because, you know, we'll still be paying gas tax at the pump, but this is to replace the gas tax at the pump with all other things being equal. Right now, there's people in the metropolitan areas, the wealthier areas of California, from the Bay Area down through Southern California, that can afford the Teslas, that can afford the electric cars without, you know, and they don't go to the pump anymore. They don't pay much for gas tax that go to the roads. And here in the Valley, we have fewer people, in fact, in our disadvantaged communities, who can afford, you know, some of the Teslas and so forth. So we're still, we're subsidizing the rest of the state with sales tax. And so we're again, what we're looking to do is to level the playing field, and where everybody pays the same, and people who have internal combustion engines are not getting ripped off on the roads, and having our road income or road tax go down so that we can fund roads. In fact, there's something called SB 339. That is a, here it is right here, and they've got a pilot program that they're going to be enacting soon, again, to just kind of take a look at what this looks like to the general public. And so we are moving forward in the state. The legislature kind of slowed down at the beginning of the Newsom administration. Now it seems like they're speeding up again. They were kind of getting it. I mean, if you're going to mandate that no more internal combustion engines get sold in the year 2035, that's kind of problematic for road funding. So that's the answer as far as that goes, and that's what we're looking at. Why not a tire tax? Well, the problem with that is that it's not based on miles that are on the road, and it would never have enough money to fund roads, because like right now, I've got tires on my car that go 70 or 80,000 miles, and how much tax, you know, would you have to pay on a tire tax? So there's different ways, but that's something we're looking at right now with under the auspices of SB 339. Any other questions?
I'd like to follow up on that. This is Frank.
Yeah.
This is a farming community. We have ranches and farms. And one of the things that we can do is get red diesel for equipment. In the future, if everything's going to be electric or hybrid, how would you do that tax on those vehicles when you eliminate the red diesel and fuels altogether down the road, if that's what the goal is? And mileage wouldn't work, a tire tax would not work. Would there be special exemption for ranch and farm equipment? I mean, how would you, is that even been discussed, or are we just too far in the future here?
Well, we've been looking at things like that. For instance, if you have a ranch vehicle, a pickup or something like that, if you're driving on your ranch road, it would be tracked by satellite. And if you're on your own ranch road, you're not going to be charged for the miles on your ranch road. And so, and that would be something similar for tractors and things of that sort. So for ranch vehicles. So there's still some details to be worked out, but believe me, I'm working hard and watching this whole thing go forward to ensure that the ag community, I'm a farmer, so I'm definitely very interested in not, getting unfairly taxed. And there's others that are from the rural communities that are looking at it very closely. So, but it's still a lot of work to be done. Christina Beckstead.
Thank you, Chairman Poitras. A question on the transit side of things, and forgive my ignorance, but so 20% of these funds would go to transit, and I'm assuming that includes maintenance, buses, employees, all that good stuff, right, to make the transit system work. So my question becomes, how much is our local transit actually used? How well utilized is it when 20% of this budget is going to it?
That is a good question. I don't necessarily have the figures here, and overall transit ridership has been going down, and the pandemic didn't help that. And so that is a good question.
We will have each of the local agencies. We're going to be requesting that each of the local agencies provide us with a presentation next month on what their modal needs are, what their systems are, including transit, roads, active transportation, and any other multimodal type projects. So we're going to be asking each of the 3 jurisdictions to make a presentation and provide us with some additional information. They didn't know that yet. They know it now. So we'll be working with them over the next month to make sure that we can answer some of those questions. I think it's important that all of us understand what it is they're doing so that we can move forward and start to look at how Measure T should be allocated in the next few months.
Correct. And it's important to note that, as we've mentioned before, is a lot of these funding sources are restrictive. And so out of the 7 that are listed there under transit, there's only 1 that has any room, any discretionary to put towards a different mode. And the rest of them can only be spent on public transportation projects for transit, for example.
Very good. Thank you. It looks like Jeff Wheeler has a question, and I would say if we don't have the data, we could get Jeff's information and get back to him, but he's got a question regarding funding for bike lanes.
We can look into that and provide that information.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff, thank you. We'll make sure we get back to you on that. So if there's no other questions, let's go ahead and move on to 5 lessons learned moving forward. Tricia Taylor, you are going to teach us some lessons. We're looking forward to it.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, this slide is put in there for when we're moving forward and developing our investment plan. Hindsight's 2020, right? So there's always lessons learned, or there's always something that we can learn and grow and adapt as we move forward in our future programs. The first item on here is flexibility, able to adapt to changing conditions. The measure program is as flexible as you can get. And you heard that earlier on in the comments that you received. It's locally controlled. And so we do have that flexibility. So when I'm speaking about flexibility here, I'm talking more about the investment plan and some sort of flexibilities that we can add within the investment plan when we're thinking and moving forward. You heard from a number of comments today related to active transportation plan, for instance, or active transportation type projects. When this particular plan was developed, active transportation was obviously known at the time, but it wasn't as much of a need. I don't know if need's the right word, but we need to have flexibility built into the programs so that we can broaden the categories so that we can apply funding in certain areas where it is actually needed. So we're looking for, we're going to need to have language in our investment plan that will allow us that opportunity to make some adjustments or amendments or changes. So I just wanted to make that point. The next one is public education. We've also learned through the interviews that we've had with each and every one of you and through others out in the public that we need to do a better job at going out there and speaking to the public about Measure T, or even about transportation funding overall. So hopefully we'll have something built in somewhat for more public education. The reason why, I'm not making excuses, but why it isn't such a huge program in Madera County is because of funding. There's a lack of funding to provide those types of services and resources and staff. So that's something that we may need to look at in terms of when we're developing the investment plan, whether or not we need to add some funding in for public education. Accountability, I think we need to also add in somewhere in the investment plan some sort of, I don't want to add more bureaucracy or add more additional work for staff, but I think it's important that we have maybe quarterly reports to our boards on an ongoing basis on what the measure is doing for our communities. Because let's face it, staff changes, boards change, councils change, leadership changes. And so we need to do a constant education on what this measure is doing for Madera County, and also transportation funding changes. So we just need to do a better job at that. As I mentioned earlier, with flexibility, clearly defined programs. So we have a variety of programs. If you pull up the current investment plan, we may need to kind of look at it and fine tune it and maybe broaden it, like I mentioned, and add categories together so that the local jurisdictions have flexibility when they're trying to program projects according to the needs. They know the needs of their constituents, and we need to have a vision, and we need to hear from the community. And so we need to work on that angle to identify the programs that are needed for the county and Madera County region. And it's diverse. Madera County is very diverse. And so we need to make sure that we are covering all bases. And then recently, this has always been a concern, is our signage. We need to increase our signage on our roads. When we're doing a project that's related to Measure T, we need to make sure that we are posting signs so that the public knows that this is how it's being funded. This is how a Measure T project is being funded, and they would be driving or riding their bike or walking, and they'd see a sign knowing, okay, this is where my sales tax dollars is going. So I just wanted to just kind of bring a little bit of attention as we're moving forward in the development of an investment plan, that we can kind of think about lessons learned. Flexibility is going to be a big thing, and make sure that we have some movement in our investment plan to be able to respond and react to our community and to our boards. So with that, I can take questions.
Thank you, Tricia. Are there any questions for Tricia regarding lessons learned? All right, thank you. So our next item will be item 6, discuss steering committee member priorities for Measure T renewal. So who is leading?
Hi, Supervisor. This is Rose Willems. I'm going to be the facilitator today, so I will lead this item.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So today, what my goal is to hear all of the community voices, to build consensus, and to remind us all that our goal as a committee is to put together a plan that the voters will support in November of 2022. So with that in mind, I want to make sure that all of you have an opportunity to share with the group what your priorities are with the group that you're representing, to make sure that as we start putting this plan together, all of these voices are heard, and that you're going back to the groups that you represent to share what the priorities are, to make sure that we can build consensus and put together a plan that works for our community. So I'd like to start, just go around kind of round robin style, keep it very informal. So those that know what their priorities are, if you want to start by raising your hand. We've got to hear a little bit from Troy, so you have an idea of what the plans have been. but we are putting together what the plan can be for the future. So if you want to raise your hand and share that, I'm going to call on everybody. So if you're a little shy, I will call on you. So be thinking about what you want to say, be as concise as possible so that all of us have an opportunity to share that. Okay, we'll start with what I can see on my screen, and then I think I'll ask Hector to help me a little bit. So Frank, do you want to start?
Certainly. One of the things I'd like to see Measure T have a change in is the funds that are currently being used to help special road districts. I believe it's a fixed amount of $100,000 per quarter, but that amount has been fixed since 2006 when it was renewed. I believe Measure T started in 1990. As the taxes increase year by year, the amount of funds to help special road districts does not increase, and it stays as a fixed number. District 5, which is the mountains of Madera County, has the most special road districts in the county. I believe there's as many road districts in District 5 as there is in the whole rest of the county. And that money is used to help repair the roads, crack seal the roads, but also vegetation mitigation for fire safety. And the homeowners on these roads just don't personally necessarily have a lot of money, because District 5 is also the largest retirement community in the county. And I'd like to see the monies from Measure T for special road districts increase in proportion to the funds as the funds increase. That's the first one. The second one is I had a meeting with Lieutenant Rob Avila, the commander of the Oakhurst, California Highway Patrol Office. And he brought up a couple of things that would be nice if Measure T could be used. And that was to increase some of the safety on Highway 41, especially in the area, which is what we're now starting to call Death Alley, which is just south of where the Chuck Chansey Casino is. And some of the roads that come up to Highway 41 are on such an angle that the drivers have to practically pull out onto Highway 41 just to see where the traffic is. And now their vehicle is partially under the roadway, and that's causing a problem. I can identify which roads with you at another time, but could we use monies for that by speaking to the highway patrol commanders? We only have two. We have Madera, that's Hector, and Rob, which is Oakhurst, and ask if there's any special safety things that they would like to see, because Rob certainly had some input on it. And those are my two items I'd like to have brought up.
Okay, so I made note of those. Great, thank you so much, Frank. Okay, next on my screen, just at the top, is Tim Curley.
Thank you, Rose. Appreciate it. So two things from Valley Children's perspective. One is the issue of public transportation, and one, making sure we're really thinking through how best do we move people around this county that don't have private transportation, they don't have transportation of their own. And I know the bus service is obviously the one piece that plays the biggest role, but there might be other creative ideas that we can come up with as well to help move people around to make sure they get to where they need to be going. So the public transportation piece, I think, needs greater focus. And so that would be one request on the part of Valley Children's, to see a bigger investment and maybe a little bit more thinking around, again, how to best move people around this county, because buses may not be, for some folks, the easiest way. So that would be one. And then two, more selfishly for Valley Children's, just looking at where and how most families access our organization from really outside of Madera County. And that is, we see a lot of families traveling from Modesto and Merced, and from Madera, and a lot of them use Avenue 9. And so I really want to see a concerted effort to enhance and just make a little more user-friendly Avenue 9. So those would be our two primary priorities.
Okay, so Tim, we almost lost you there. So Avenue 9.
Yeah, Avenue 9 would be the
Okay.
second, since
Got it.
folks who are coming from the North Valley and even from Madera are primarily using Avenue 9.
So Avenue 9 improvements. Got
Yeah.
it.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, now we got this screen. So Madeline, we're going to start with you up in the corner. Is that okay?
Sounds good. Thank you. Everything that Tim Curley just mentioned is also on my list. I would say that priorities for us would include there needs to be a component of equity in prioritizing disadvantaged communities, and particularly disadvantaged unincorporated communities. Because we're seeing with systems like the pavement management system and just which projects are getting prioritized regardless of whether or not they're road projects, that disadvantaged communities are getting told to wait or getting left out of that process. Second, air quality improvements, GHG emission reductions should be greatly prioritized. As I mentioned on the last steering committee call, we know that this decade, according to climate scientists, is the decade that's going to determine the future of humanity on this planet. So that's a big priority. Also, we're living in, one of the most contaminated air basins in the nation. So we really need to prioritize air quality. A lot of the residents that I work with suffer from serious health impacts due to disproportionately bad air quality in Madera County as well. And then, as I mentioned before, we need to significantly increase investment in active transportation infrastructure. And like I said, with the equity component, active transportation infrastructure in disadvantaged communities. And then, as Supervisor Poitras mentioned, there needs to be more equitable access to zero emission vehicles. I know he mentioned a lot of folks can't necessarily afford that, but if there's a way to, make those more accessible for folks in Madera County, leveraging Measure T funds, that'd be great to see. And then we could also invest in zero emission vehicle infrastructure. And then lastly, as Tim mentioned, usable and accessible public transit. And I want to echo what he said about thinking creatively about how to best do that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, Jared Carter.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you. I would say, from my perspective, one of the key things that from a county side, and again, implementing a lot of these projects, is just the flexibility that we need to be able to put this money where it makes the most sense for the transportation system as a whole. We have I know the county maintains over 1,500 miles of roadway, and that's in everything from rural to semi-urban areas. And I know that the cities have a little less, but much more densely populated, obviously, so greater impacts. And so, the flexibility to be able to utilize these funds where it makes the most sense and gives the most benefit to the public as a whole is something that I think is very important as we kind of think about how we move forward with this.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go top of the screen. Matt Watson.
Yeah, as far as projects that would benefit, the fire department, whether that be CAL FIRE, the city of Madera, the county of Madera, is anything you can get, the major throughways. That way we can, expedite fire equipment through. The Highway 145, if they're, in alignment with Avenue 17 and 99, to reduce that truck traffic through the city is kind of important. That way they don't clog up the roadways for our emergency equipment. Avenue 99 or Avenue 99 to 41, if that was some sort of, Jared will probably correct me on the terminology, but parkway where it's, kind of divided 4 lanes, that's kind of a high priority. And obviously 41 was already mentioned, but, a 4-laning 41 is huge for our fire equipment. A lot of people may notice we do that fuels reduction project from Road 200 south to Tesoro Viejo. And that really helps with not getting fires along 41 and plugging up 41. But, you know, 4-lane access through there is very important. At first, the roundabout type project that was done in North Fork, I was kind of leery of it, but I can tell you during the Creek fire that was very beneficial to keep fire traffic flowing and still allow for citizens to travel through. But, you know, any type of project like that, or the recent one in Oakhurst, all that helps our fire vehicles access, you know, the major roads so we can get on scene quicker. Another one, and I just drove this yesterday, and I don't know if this is part of this group, but, you know, getting Almond Avenue punched through the city of Madera is huge, especially for one of the city fire stations accessing the hospital for if there was a potential need. But those are kind of the projects that off the top of my head, without doing a bunch of research, would really help with the fire department in general. And probably the same thing, Highway 233 through the city of Chowchilla also.
Okay, great. I took note of all of that. Thank you, Matt. Jeffrey Wheeler, sorry. I don't know where that came from, Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you. I'm the active transportation representative. So my interests are in seeing funding allocated to active transportation, which in my mind includes, besides pedestrians and bicyclists, but also buses. So I've just been brainstorming a little bit. Having lived in Chowchilla for some years, a major infrastructure that we need there is a safe way to get across Highway 99. Either putting in a new interchange that has had some planning done for it already, or else a bike or multi-use path under 99. I've ridden that overpass and it's a little hairy on my bicycle. It would be wonderful to have safe and smooth bike routes from Chowchilla up to connecting into Merced County and south to Madera. I am not yet familiar with the need for getting safe and smooth bike routes down to the college campus and onto Fresno. In terms of transit, we need a bus connection to Merced, at least up to Planada, where people can catch a connecting bus. Now for public transportation, we are moving to having apps that give us bus arrival times and routes and route planners if you want to go somewhere by public transit. So there are many of them, and it would be useful to have one that works for both Madera City, Madera County, and into Merced City and County, and Fresno City and County to be the same one, and also to work with and to have a, you call it a transit token or an e-payment application for getting tickets for buses, and that these apps would be also integrated besides with our northern and southern neighbors, but also with Amtrak. So people can use multimodal forms of transportation, especially people who can't drive or don't own cars. And it would be wonderful to have extended schedules for buses, longer hours and more frequently. Two things that might not be in anybody else's radar, but there's a need for more bicycle repair shops and bicycle shops in at least in Madeira and Chowchilla. And one means for addressing that is using bicycle kitchens. Bicycle kitchen is like a volunteer bicycle repair shop that has used parts and rebuilt bicycles, and that can provide training and do other outreach and support for active transportation locally. And another thing that's needed for maintaining safety for bicyclists, you know, if you want to get you want to ride Howard Road or someplace in Madeira, it's a little, it takes a courageous cyclist. But even for school children to be able to ride safely on low stress roads need some training, some education. So to have programs where we can teach, provide bicycles and teach children how to ride safely in their environments is another need.
Okay, is that sounds great. Does that complete your list, Jeffrey?
Just for now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to skip staff unless Tricia, you wanted staff to weigh in.
No, I think it's okay to go ahead and skip staff.
Okay, all right.
Not local agency staff though, but just our MCTC.
MCTC staff. Okay. Michael Navarro with Caltrans.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. Probably gonna be all over the place. There's a lot of need, obviously, in Madera County for us. But I think, you know, one thing I harped on too, what Jared said I wanted to mention was flexibility. You know, I've worked with various measure programs, and you know, some of the way the measures are written in the ballot, you're really locked in on what projects you can do. And a lot of the success we've had with Madera County, and I'll give the 99, for example, is our ability to partner. And you heard the number about leveraging funds. You know, the 33.5 million in the draft ITIP doesn't happen without Measure T keeping that project alive for getting it through design. So I think flexibility can be extremely important. I recognize a lot of the bang for your buck you're going to get in your county as a region doesn't need to be on the state highway system. There's a lot of benefit for mode shift to complete streets. A lot of that could happen off system. So Caltrans is very supportive of those kind of projects too. We have main streets through Madera County with State Route 233 through Chowchilla, and State Route 145. So anything on the complete streets fronts, be very supportive of, and then accommodate disadvantaged communities. But that doesn't mean we can't forget about 99 totally. And as we navigate through that, it's gonna be obviously very hard to widen, as we all know. I know the W word's bad, but as we look at the 99 corridor, we can't forget about the goods movement going through there and looking at opportunities for whether it's freight electrification or sustainable freight opportunities through the corridor. Because if we are gonna widen as a last resort, we need to make sure we're doing it responsibly through there. And then, you know, the safety and operational projects are very important. You know, we have, you know, rural routes like State Route 41, where I heard a gentleman mention earlier about some of these intersections, and I get a lot of phone calls on those. And you know, a lot of times it's easier for us to work, collaborate, and have a local agency take the lead, because you might have heard some of our projects are kind of expensive. So part of our local partners, we can make a financial contribution. If they have measure components, we can look at some of these safety enhancements in the corridor, like roundabouts, et cetera, which have been very successful in increased safety. So we're at to really safely manage and operate what we have out there in terms of infrastructure. Not a lot of funds available. So I think a lot of opportunity for safety and operational improvements would be a priority for the state as well. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, now we have Keith, Jose, and Orlando with the city of Madera. I don't know which one of you want to, which one of you want to go first? Who has the longest list, or you all have something different to talk about? Keith, do you want to start as staff?
I'll start as staff. I think I'm going to go ahead and repeat what Jared and Michael said. I think flexibility is important, especially if the measure goes for 30 years to perhaps in perpetuity. But I do also think that we have to have defined projects. I don't think we'll be successful with the measure without the public being able to go ahead and identify projects that they can relate to, whether that's safety or infrastructure projects or the like. I'd also like to note that, well, the amount of money that may be going towards ADA type improvements seems to be small. I do want to note that, as an example, the city of Madera, our council has endorsed new street cross sections that would include bike lanes and wider sidewalks. So because the numbers are low potentially on those things, it doesn't mean that the agencies aren't going to be focusing in those areas. That's about all I have for the moment.
Great. I guess before I go to Jose, is there anybody else that has to jump off for another meeting? I can call on you next.
I guess I should raise my hand. Sorry, raise my hand.
Yeah, anybody can raise their hand if they need to jump off and we'll call on you. Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, thank you. So I do have a 4 o'clock, so I thought I'd hop in here. And I'm with the County of Madera Chief of Development Services. So as far as kind of priorities, there's a lot. There's always a ton. One of the big things that I don't know that I've heard to date is in the existing program and the ability to maximize dollars in our maintenance districts and some of the funding there. We've really been able to stretch dollars and get improvements into communities on their local streets there in those maintenance districts has been a huge help. Obviously, 99 and getting that taken care of in the 6-lane, filling in those gaps is huge. You know, the 41 corridor and improvements out that corridor to 4 lanes, and our expressways of 9 and 12 and 15 are key road networks. And you know, we have looked in the past in our fee program at trying to allocate dollars for additional river crossings and connectivity between 17 and 145 is a big priority there as well. So that's just kind of high level, big major topics, I think, from my standpoint to be looking at. And it's not just, you know, the valley corridors of 41. We have, you know, impacted intersections up in the foothills, 41 and 222, looking at roundabouts and 631 up there, Sky Ranch Road, improvements through that corridor. And, you know, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk, right? We've got a lot of pedestrian bicycle improvements needed throughout the county in a number of different areas and communities as well. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, now I see some hands raised. So Lisa.
There. I'm actually in my car on
no problem. Be safe, please.
Sitting on the side of a road right
okay,
now
that makes
we're
me
talking
feel better.
about. So I think I'm going to echo what Frank and Matt said. I own a business in North Fork, so I can confirm the roundabout is amazing, especially during tourist season. But for us, I think 41 is the most important expansion, covering those safety areas. I think the figure I was told once, and I don't know for sure, so I'll have to look it up, but 4 million people a year are coming to Yosemite. And then of course we have all the residents who are commuting for work, and not all of these people know how to navigate our roads. And you know, it's not called Death Alley for nothing. And as someone who has people come from areas to our establishment, I think safety's a big one. So yeah, that's I love bicycles. We see bicyclists every weekend up there in the mountains. That is another area, bicycle safety. But I think the number one priority on my list is 41.
Great, so noted. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank
now,
you.
if you're gonna drive, please be safe as you're continuing in the.
Oh, I will. No, I've been parked on the side of the road the whole time.
All right, thanks. Okay, Jose, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think a lot of the stuff has already been said. I do want to say congestion mitigation. I think that was said by Ms. Harris earlier. A lot of the things that she said certainly resonate with me. You know, the quality of air, Madera, of course, the area that we serve here obviously has issues with poor air quality. You top that with diabetes and obesity, and that becomes a big issue as far as health goes. So active transportation certainly would be something of priority. You know, our sidewalks, bike lanes, anything that's got to do that allows people to be more mobile to get to the center of town would be a part of the priority to help folks again with some health issues that we see. I mean, you look at underserved areas, and these areas are high in risk for health issues. I know that we talked about electric vehicles, obviously some type of dollars that we can leverage to incentivize some of the folks here, including some of those Measure T dollars to incentivize folks to convert EV. I know that there's something out there now. Maybe we can continue to push that effort and incentivize more. You know, not too long ago, there was a survey done as far as how people would react to this measure. And what resonated with a lot of folks is fixing roads. And a lot of that, you know, I know widening projects and freeways and what have you, but what resonates with folks more is fixing the actual roads, you know, potholes, paving, seals, all those little things are huge. And I think for the city of Madera, we'd like to see our roads more, you know, just improve, big improvement. And I think all of you here can attest to that and probably agree with me that more and more folks are always calling you more on potholes, paving the paving the roads and fixing and sealing certain things than they are talking about certain things with freeways. Freeways are certainly important, very important to me, obviously with this widening of 99, but I think these little things are what really resonate with folks. So those are mine. I think a lot of it has been said already, and I'm sure our city manager has a lot more to add to that, but thank you for the time. Appreciate you all being here.
Thank you. Okay, Orlando. Am I getting your name right? I don't have my glasses on.
It's Arnoldo, but that's okay. It's a tough
Sorry,
name.
I just realized
No,
after
okay.
I said it.
No,
So
that's
sorry.
a difficult name. And so thank you. So I believe a lot of the items have been said already, but I do want to simply echo a couple of things. I think the Highway 99 corridor is imperative not just for the city of Madera, but rather for the region as a whole. It serves not only, you know, city of Madera, you know, and all the valley towns, the city of Chowchilla, but also for goods movement and a lot of the farmers in the area that are trying to get their product, you know, throughout the valley. And that I think if we don't continue to make improvements on 99, I think the region as a whole is going to suffer. One big thing specifically for the city of Madera, and I think for the city of Chowchilla, would be safe routes to school. We have a lot of routes that can be improved. A lot of our communities, we have a lot of disenfranchised individuals that unfortunately that either lack transportation from their parents because they're coming from working families, or they don't have bus routes. And so I think anything we can do for safe routes to school, and I think it's going to resonate with voters. When people see improvements for safe routes to school, I think it's positive. And I think it goes back to what Councilmember Rodriguez said, is making some of those small improvements. Grade separation for the city of Madera is imperative for the railroad. We have a railroad track that transects or that traverses the entire city. There's about 5 miles without a railroad crossing, and the 2 railroad crossings that are there are only crossings. They have no connection to either the highway or to some of the other local roadways, specifically Alice, and then you go down Avenue 13. And so what ends up happening when we're talking about emergency response, when you're talking the afternoon times, you have a lot of students in Madera that walk or bike home from school to work or emergency services, and the community gets really clogged. I understand that would be a big ask, but I can assure you, if you come through Madera, actually right now, the streets are probably clogged, especially when there's rail crossing right through the middle of the city. Local bridges in our community are needed. I can't speak on behalf of Chachilla, but I know here in Madera, that's a big need here in the city. And I think for the county as well. I think that we can alter some traffic patterns in a positive manner if we focus on a couple of bridges, either be it on the periphery of our community, of the city specifically, or in the city itself. I think a special focus on local roads would be key, and I think it resonates with voters. While the voters love to see new bridges and new overpasses and awesome interchanges like the one at 12, which is great, I think sometimes people just want the road in front of their house repaired. A couple other things that have been said. Making some completions to the local roadway system. I know Chief Watson had mentioned Almond Avenue, but if it's a relatively short trip. However, that improvement can potentially alter enormous impacts to Olive Avenue here in town, Pine and Stadium. And so I think if we look at some of those, they're relatively minor, but they would go a long way. I think some of the other things were said already, but to recap, Highway 99, great separation of railroad and potentially bridges and some local road improvements. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Great, great. Anybody else want to share their thoughts before I start calling on people? Jason.
Yes, thank you. So a couple of things, just kind of want to reiterate some of what has been heard from some of our other local agencies. Definitely flexibility for spending money, but definitely a focus on maintenance of existing infrastructure. I believe yesterday at the MCTC meeting, local staff gave a presentation to the MCTC board where I think every agency admitted to not having enough funds to maintain the current roads that we have.
And Jason, just to remind everybody, you're with the city of Chowchilla.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that is a big issue for all of us as we move forward. Is while it's nice to have these additional projects, as Arnaldo said, when people see a nice new bridge, it's, oh, that's nice, but how come you didn't fix my road? And so that's a big one. To specific projects, though, I think what Keith said earlier is that we do need to have some type of specific projects mentioned in this. And one of my concerns is similar to Arnaldo's, is that we have a train railroad system that runs through the middle of town. And when a train stops on that, it can effectively cut off access to one side of town. In fact, we had that about a month ago where a train had stopped for 10 hours and cut off access to that side, the east side and the west side. So something like an additional access point or overcrossing over 99 and the railroad track could be beneficial on providing that access, especially for emergency services. And with that, I'll go ahead and leave it at that and let others provide more input.
Thank you. Rhonda with Yosemite Sierra Visitors Bureau.
Hi. I didn't think I'd have a lot to say, but listening to everybody, I came up with some good points. I think that affect the mountain area here. I think the biggest problem is up here is that the lack of communication or the lack of availability of ways to communicate with the citizens to say, hey, we look at our roads and they're bad, but what have we done well? What have we improved on? So I think we need to really maybe have a cheat sheet or something for me to say, hey, we are not always overlooked, that we do have some great projects that have been done recently, even though the roads are bad. There's a lot of roads up here. So that's, we'd be happy to work with everybody to see how we can communicate better. We lost a newspaper, so it's not as easy as it used to be. So that was one point. So I think that's really important that we communicate our successes better and communicate what we're doing and what has been done with the Measure T money. Because when I saw the breakdown last time, we were getting some of that money and we were getting a good portion of it. So I don't think people up here really believe we do. So that public transportation. So the MCC comes up here and through here, and I don't think it gets a lot of ridership. So I think we really need to look at that as a community and see how we could, if there was maybe just a mountain MCC that connected with Madeira, maybe that would be better utilization of the money and people might utilize that a little more. We did our first year of our pilot project with our trolley, and it was so well received. We only had about 2,000 riders, but it was a really bad year to start with COVID still continuing, and with that heat this summer was terrible. So we're looking at another vehicle. Our board has agreed to fund it for several more years because we really think it's a good thing, and it gets people off the roads congestion during the summer. We do see about 3 million people come through here for Yosemite and Bass Lake and just tourism and in general. So it's a really heavy trafficked area. And so that trolley's, it's adorable. It makes you smile. And I think there's some way that we can partner together a little better to get people around the mountains and utilize this public transportation a little more. Active transportation, of course, is a big deal for residents and for tourism. Better visitor access off of 99. I know we've talked about this for many, many years. The Cleveland Avenue exit for people heading towards Yosemite is really bad. So somehow, some way, if we can figure out how to fix that or get another exit or something, that would be great. I'm sure that's been on the project list for many years. Pedestrian bridge, definitely we need something with the 3 new hotels with thousands of more people a day. We need some kind of bridge over 41. It's our town, and it's also a major highway, so that poses problems, as Michael knows a lot. And then we had our sidewalk situation up here is not the best walkable town, so the trolley was good. And it's hard with sidewalks here because we have, the way the businesses are laid out, you have to have driveways and parking areas. But, I know we can improve that a little bit. And then electric charging stations. I think we have just 2, maybe 3 in Oakhurst. That is obviously a future project, but something that we really need to look at how we're going to do that better. And I'm not sure if there will be any in the park and ride, the new park and ride. So that's about it. And we're happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rhonda. I think we've covered a lot of ground. If you have projects or programs that haven't been covered, please email us and we'll add it to our notes. And I'll turn it back over to our co-chair so we can.
Can I add just one thing?
Oh, sure, Sarah. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So 2 important things.
Sure.
Obviously, there have been lots of things that have been talked about that relate to health, and that's awesome. The first is that when I came here and started reviewing death records, I was shocked by the number of people who are hit and killed by trains.
Sarah, just remind everybody who you're representing.
Oh, I'm Department of Public Health Director.
Thank you.
Thanks. And so I was shocked by the number of people that are hit and killed by trains in the city of Madeira. It really is so preventable. And I think it intermingles with mental health issues and things like that. But it really is something from a harm reduction standpoint that needs to be addressed. And also ambulances and all of those kinds of things. So safety, and it really dovetails with having walkable communities. And I think that one of the biggest kind of hurdles that we have in terms of economic development in our largest city of our county is that it's not set up in a way that it's easy to get around and that would attract like a quality of life for residents that have the ability to go lots of other places for their careers. And if we really want to kind of build a positive economy in the Central Valley, we need to have more communities that are built like the communities that really attract people, that have funds to be able to shop and build culture and ambiance and all of those kinds of things. So I think as we're looking at our transportation projects, as much as possible, if we can be thinking about how do we dovetail with those other visionary kinds of things with our cities to really attract business. And from a, like, as we write the measure, it would be great to put into it that we prioritize projects that have direct input from the community. So that I think that's one selling thing for the tax, and it also kind of builds in that accountability that they are projects that are prioritized by individuals who live, work, play in Madera. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you, Rose. And thank you, everybody, for your great comments and contributions. And that's what we're looking for. So thank you again. We'll move on to item number 7, public engagement program update. So public engagement.
Yes, that's going to be TBWBH. They're in charge of the public engagement program. I believe Alex can briefly review a couple of items and then we can move on. So I'm going to stop sharing and let her bring up a couple of items.
Yeah,
let's see here.
Pull
Go
them
to
up.
Alex and let's see. There you go.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Be Charles and I today.
Yeah, thanks
I'm
for
sorry,
sharing
Charles
that.
as well. Charles and Alex.
No problem. Thanks for sharing that on the screen. And this will be brief. I know we're up against our time limit here. When we presented the voter survey results at your meeting last month, we discussed how, based on the strength of the support we were seeing, we would be moving forward with both preparing the measure for the ballot, including the steering committee's work to develop the investment plan, but also broader outreach to the community to make sure that they are aware of what Measure T has accomplished to date, but also the details of the proposed renewal measure as it comes together. So Alex and I, based on what we've learned from the survey research and the discussions that have occurred to date, have put together the beginnings of a messaging plan that will roll out in the coming months. It really runs from basically where we are today through next August, which is essentially when the measure would be placed on the ballot and we would have to transition into an advocacy campaign. And so I won't go through the entire timeline that we've developed in detail, but just to cover some of the highlights of the coming months, sort of between now and the end of the calendar year. We've started by developing some talking points and some answers to frequently asked questions that can be utilized both by MCTC and the city staff that may receive questions or inquiries about this process and about Measure T. But also steering committee members and members of your own organizations. And those will be distributed to the group following this meeting. And there Alex is showing some examples of those talking points. And then there's also some associated frequently asked questions that address some of the common questions that we expect to come up. If you're hearing questions that aren't covered in the FAQ, let us know and we'll develop answers to those as well. Moving forward, we're also going to be working on an informational video that can be used as a presentation aid and something that can be shared around to help tell the story of what Measure T has accomplished to date and why the renewal of that funding is important. And then from there, as we get into the first of the year, we'll be doing more proactive outreach with other groups and organizations in the community. We'll have a social media program designed to get our messaging out. And also we'll be sending some informational direct mail pieces to voters in the county at large. So that's a brief update on kind of our outreach and engagement strategy. And like I said, those the talking points and FAQs will be coming around to the group following this meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Charles. It's really great. Sounds exciting. Any questions of Charles? Hearing and seeing none, let's move on to item 8. And these are next steps. Number 1, staff items. Tricia Taylor and Georgina.
I will let Tricia go ahead and get started. Well, I actually can start with the renewal schedule. Let me do that. I'm going to bring up the renewal schedule, just go through it very quickly. And that is an Excel spreadsheet. I thought it was an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe not. Yeah, I'm going to need to bring that up. Tricia, did you want to review the steering committee vacancy that we still have? And I'll bring up the schedule in the meantime. Sorry.
Sure. Thank you, Georgina. So we're doing a great job on filling the vacancies. Since our last meeting, we had several vacancies for our steering committee. There's only one remaining, and that's for goods movement. So if you know of any representative that you think would be a good participant who would represent goods movement in our region, that would be very helpful. We can make those contacts accordingly. So if you do have a potential individual of interest, go ahead and shoot us over an email with contact information and we will reach out. I know we were originally trying to reach Mr. Cox, Jeff Cox for goods movement, but I don't know if we have been able to do that yet. So that was one individual's name who had surfaced, but I have not heard back. So just so that we have all the spots filled, just let us know. And that's the only vacancy, so great job.
Yeah, really great job. We've got an entire committee put together in a very short time, so kudos to everyone.
Just to answer Jeff's question, it would be in the category of goods movement. So trucking, rail, whatever, would be involved in moving goods.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and then in terms of the schedule, of course, we've already completed the meeting we had in September on September 23rd, and we covered those items. Today is 10/21, and we've covered all of these items, of course. For the next meeting, we're looking at, as I mentioned before, working with the local agencies, giving them the opportunity to identify some of their priorities for funding, Measure T funding, as well as identifying what they've used Measure T funding for over the past 20 plus years. So we'll be working with them over the next few weeks to start to pull those presentations together. We're also going to review with you what other self-help counties have been doing. Self-help counties are those counties that have sales tax measures. So we'll be working with them to, we'll identify what other counties are doing, especially as it relates to the different types of programs that they're including in their measures, and how flexible those programs are, because I think that'll be very important. And then, of course, duration of the measure as well. We will be reviewing the transportation projects and program costs by funding mode. Those will be available from MCTC now. They have we've completed with them a database that includes, as I said, over 800 different modal projects. So we are able to at least identify what the complete picture of project need is. And then, of course, MCTC will be working through their regional transportation planning process, and hopefully we'll be able to see what projects will be funded and what the need for Measure T funding will be by mode in December. And then, of course, we will have another public engagement update every month from TBWBH props and measures. I'm not going to go through each of these months in detail. Some of these are going to move over to the next month because we weren't able to get to the item on the agenda. And some months, as I've noted here, we may have to have 2 meetings because we're trying to get all of this pulled together in a short period of time. So we will post this as well so you can get a sense of what you're going to be learning about and discussing as we move forward with these meetings. Any questions?
And so, Georgina, this is Tricia. I failed to mention when you were mentioning schedule. We did need to have just a brief discussion on whether or not this time of day works, or if we should move it up to 1:30. If you noticed, we had some participants who had to drop off because there is a workforce development meeting that starts at 3. That only happens every other month. Don't know if we need to move to 1:30 or if that would cause any problems, but it might help to at least have those other participants last, on the call for an additional half hour.
So I guess for those of you who are on the call right now, would that be a problem starting at 1:30?
That's fine by me.
Okay, so Rhonda would be a problem with her.
What is the cadence of the meetings?
They're
Right
every,
now?
they're every third Thursday from 2 to 4, 2 hours.
You know, I think we're,
As it is, I didn't join the meeting until much later because the Calviva Commission meeting is at the same time.
Oh,
So
okay.
if it's moved earlier, then I'll miss even more, but I'm just one person.
okay. So on chat, what are the, let me see, 1:30, okay. Jeff says 1:30 is okay, for, problem for Rhonda. So it looks like it's, other than Rhonda, it would work pretty well. I know Bobby Kahn and Supervisor Frazier had to get off, and not sure about Christina. There's a few others. So what's the, want me to make an executive decision? I know it's important, I think, to have Rhonda on the call. Why don't we go ahead?
You know what, Rob, I will move things and try to fix that. This is important.
Okay.
Right.
Am I able to delegate someone else from public health to participate? Because it looks like I'm probably gonna not be able to with the
Yes.
Sarah,
Okay.
you can always designate somebody, so that would be fine. It's, you know, I think the important thing is having, you know, strong representation from public health for obvious reasons. So, so feel free to designate somebody. So, well, why don't we go ahead with 1:30 then?
Okay.
And then we can we'll make it work that way.
Okay, that sounds great. Anything else, Tricia? The next meeting date is November 18th. That's the third Thursday. So we'll change the time from 2 o'clock to 1:30. Okay.
No,
Right.
we're staying, Georgina, this is Rose, just to clarify, 1:30 to 3:30 then, correct?
Right.
Remember?
Correct.
Okay.
2 hours.
Right.
Yes. There was a request. I'm sorry, Rob. Is it okay if I continue with the staff items?
Please.
Okay, so there was a request from MCTC. They need your involvement in the regional transportation planning process. I'm going to let Dylan make the pitch and see if some of you might volunteer to help MCTC out as well in another endeavor. So Dylan?
Thank you, Georgina. So I wanted to let everyone know while we're here, we have a workshop coming up for our regional transportation plan. That's going to be Monday night. I've provided a link in the chat, or the information is on the screen as well. Our RTP really, it has a lot of overlap for the things we talk about in this meeting. It's a long-range transportation plan, and it looks at the comprehensive transportation picture as we can project it into the future. Our plan's going to go out to the year 2046 this time. And there's a whole lot of factors that go into understanding what our needs are going to be, and ultimately what our investments are going to need to be on a broad scale beyond just this measure. So there's really a lot with what we're doing with both of these efforts that are related. And we think it'd be a great opportunity for people to check this out and join us on Monday evening. We're also looking for individuals that are really part of this group as well, our community leaders and stakeholders, to help us guide that plan. So your involvement will be very welcome. This workshop's going to talk about what our RTP is, what's required of it, what a sustainable community strategy is, which is a primary requirement of our regional transportation plan, how it's all going to work, and how you and members of the public play a part in creating this plan for our future. We'll have an exercise that where we can get some feedback and some opinions on what people think are important in our region, what we need to be addressing, and what we need to be looking at. So I would definitely invite you to take a look, follow the link that we've provided to register, or check out the website we have set up for our RTP-SCS plan. And also some activity that will happen after this workshop is we will be forming a very similar committee to the one here. One that will definitely already involve our local agencies, as they play a key part in implementing the projects that are in our plans. But we also want to invite members of this committee to serve on that committee as well and help guide the important things we're going to be looking at for that development. So please take a look and join us if you can on Monday evening.
Dylan, will you be recording the workshop on Monday?
Absolutely. And the survey and activities that we do during that workshop are going to be available for anyone that comes to our website to participate in, whether they can join us or not. So we're going to have a lot of different ways we're talking about to get feedback for our efforts that just as some of the feedback we've already got for the Measure T effort is useful for us in the RTP, things we learned from the RTP are going to be useful for this effort as well. So there's going to be a lot of, you're going to be hearing a lot from MCTC in the coming year because of these big efforts we have going on.
So just to let the group know, and there is a local election here at the City of Madera, and there's a candidates forum happening at the same time here at the City of Madera. So you may not see a lot of participation from folks here at the City of Madera.
Okay, thanks. We'll definitely be able to touch base with your staff or anyone if they are not able to join with us, and we're going to have a lot more opportunities to engage with the development of the plan.
Okay, thanks, Dylan.
And Dylan, I know we had this discussion earlier. I caught the tail end of it in our pre-meeting. Will interpretation be available on Mondays? I know we were talking about future workshop. Will there be interpretation available on Monday's workshop?
Yes, there will. We are prepared for anybody that comes that needs to have the workshop in Spanish. We haven't had any requests for other languages, but we're prepared either way for Spanish. And just to touch up on some other activities that are coming in the future, we are trying to coordinate some in-person engagements in some of our lesser served communities where Spanish is the primary speaking language. So there's a lot we have planned.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So if there's no other announcements from staff, we've talked about the next meeting date, the starting time, and last but not least, is there any remaining public comment? If not, I'd just like to again thank the presenters today and thank the participants, and I sure appreciate the information. I think it was a great workshop, and keep up the great work, everybody. And if I don't talk to you before, we'll see you on the 18th.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Be safe out there. Thank you.
All right.
Hi there. Okay, so, okay,